to Utopia Science Fiction, the podcast. We're joined today by our design editor, Jonathan, and special guest star, our poetry editor, Lynne Sargent. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Tristan.
Hello.
We will be discussing a very short story done by Victoria Zelvin, and it's called A Sunrise Every 90 Minutes. It was published in Flash Fiction Online this March 2021. So let's start off with a synopsis of the story, just so we can catch up anyone who hasn't read it. There will be a link in the comments below, so you can follow that to reach the story. But let's just start off with a brief synopsis. Lynne, do you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah. So A Sunrise Every 90 Minutes is about the experiences of an astronaut named Josephine. So she's on her way back to her planet, the planet Earth, and something terrible has happened on the ground, but she doesn't know what it is. And so she's just up there watching the sunrise every 90 minutes, enjoying her time alone in the atmosphere after having been on, presumably, on space station like the ISS for the last number of months, and is trying to find comfort and hoping for another voice to come back on the line sometime soon.
That's good. I don't have anything to add to it. It's a nice short story, very sweet, very well written. What was everyone's first impressions? Jonathan, what were your first impressions?
I personally found it quite depressing, but it felt like a rather apocalyptic story, especially since there would be like a massive storm come up over the region that she was in contact with, and soon all contact is lost as soon as the storm hits.
Yeah. There's something kind of melancholy, I think, about the writing and about the story.
So I think for me, when I came to this story, what I found really striking was just like the character of Josephine, the astronaut. And I do think that what is really, really striking about the story is the juxtaposition of her character, who is very, calm and collected and on top of things and trying to find the beauty in this disaster, compared to like the objective terror that I think that anyone else would feel in this situation. And I think that just, for me, gets back to the idea of like heroes going into space and, the best thing that you can have in a bad situation and the most like hopeful thing is competent people who know what they're doing and can keep a level head in a disaster.
Yeah. Josephine seems like a very strong character, very well characterized. And there's that contrast behind this kind of, I don't know if the word is fatalistic, this kind of acceptance, this kind of stoic acceptance of what you can and cannot change, and finding the beauty in that, in the fact that the sun keeps rising. There's that promise, that hope, that if you can see another sunrise, you might get through until this situation is cleared up. And it does seem like the situation is starting to clear up. It seems like there's voices, there's occasional radio signal that gets through. So it seems like it's at the tail end of the apocalypse. I don't know if that's what other people picked up, or...
For me, I got very Day After Tomorrow vibes. Everything's very apocalyptic for a bit, but at the end of the movie, there is sort of hope for humanity afterwards. And that's sort of like the same vibe that I got here with this story, that like something terrible has happened. It's an immediate terrible thing. It's global, but they are on the way to fixing it. So I definitely agree with you there, Tristan.
I like that you said Day After Tomorrow. I hadn't thought about that film, but there is some kind of reminiscent like echo of that in here. Going off of that, what do you think actually happened on Earth, or is happening?
So I think it's kind of interesting, right? Because the story, obviously Josephine doesn't know what's happening either, but she does sort of gesture at, I think it's climate change is one possible potential disaster, and the other one is, like Godzilla has come up and Godzilla and Mothra are battling it out and whatever. And of course, like one of these seems like a much more realistic disaster than another. When I read it as well, I could also see the clouds being like some kind of, nuclear warfare or chemical warfare. I definitely think it makes a lot more sense, though, that if this disaster is man-made, and maybe that's just like where we are as a society right now. But I also think then Josephine is a much stronger protagonist because she's the other side of things. Astronauts are the best of humanity, and she's handling this crisis with just absolute grace.
Yeah. And there's definitely
Yeah,
there's a bit of ambiguity there.
and a little bit
Jonathan?
of speculation too. That like I think a line that struck out to me was whether or not it was an attack of some sort. So
Mm.
perhaps it could be an alien invasion or something like that.
I think I definitely thought climate change of some kind, like some catastrophic climate change, but there's enough mystery and there's enough ambiguity that it could be something completely different and completely more fantastic. So it could be Godzilla or an alien attack, and there's no way of knowing.
And that's
And
really
now
nice, right?
some,
Because it puts like the reader in the same place that Josephine is in.
Mm-hmm. I think that was probably one of my favorite like aspects to the story was that ability to put the reader in the same perspective and have the same feelings and emotions kind of evoked. So, do you think that this is a utopian story?
um, well, I think I kind of gave it away already, or my
Mm-hmm.
opinion away already, but I didn't consider it utopian at first.
At first, do you think, if you read it again, would you have another consideration?
I think after listening to what Lynne just said, having that much brighter view of humanity, that one of the best examples of our species surviving this cataclysm is somewhat optimistic, even if the story itself is largely apocalyptic.
Yeah, I definitely, when I first read through it, I had a bit of trouble seeing, is this really a utopian story? It doesn't feel that way at first, but then as you reread it, as you go through it, you start to see that there is this optimism hidden in the melancholy, this hope, this belief that things are going to get better after this, even amid the fear that it might not.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I have a pretty broad definition of what counts as utopian. Because for me, like the idea of utopia is just like, we're doing better tomorrow than we did today. We need good people to do that, right? I think if the last like couple of years have taught us anything, it's that we need good, upstanding citizens and people that are, have the strength of will to do what's right, stay calm in a crisis, all this kind of stuff. And to see that reflected in the disaster, she's not freaking out. She's still doing the right thing. She's being a kind ear to someone on the ground who needs it, when she's there on the comms. That's what I want to see more of in the future is more people like Josephine the astronaut. So that's really what made this utopian for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's definitely inspiring in some ways. What do you think about the writing style?
I love how crisp and clean the writing is here. It's like it's not flowery, but it's not spare either. It's exactly what it needs to be. I think what is, the thing that I love most about the story is just like the little bit of repetition throughout there. I think it sort of gives it a little bit of a poetic quality, which is probably why I like it so much. This like continued repetition about the sun. Josephine has so much more than that. Josephine has much less than that.
Mm,
It's evocative in this sort of like, I don't know, like it could be a speech maybe or like an epic poem, but it's got that rhythm to it that I think is really unique and really driving.
yeah, you mentioned the line Josephine has much more than that. Josephine has much less than that, and that's actually one of my favorite lines. There are a few like really perfect lines that I will remember for a very long time after I leave the story, and those are some of them. And I think you mentioned the repetition. In some way, like the repetition serves the story as you're orbiting around and around and around this planet. You're repeating the same
Mm.
motion, and so the repetition in the story of certain lines kind of mimics that motion, which is
I
what I.
hadn't noticed put those two things together, but that's you're very right there, I think.
it's a really cool thing to have like accomplished, especially in such a short story. To get so much out of it, it's just really evocative and wonderful.
I'm not sure what I could add to that, aside from it's definitely one of the best flash fictions I've ever read, and that word choice is extremely important when you do something that short. From memory, I don't think there was a single line that I would have taken out as being redundant or out of
Yeah.
place.
What do you think the theme or the message of this story is?
Hope.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't know if anyone like follows Jo Walton on Twitter, but she's got this great line about sunrises, and I'm going to butcher it here, but there's a sunrise and a sunset every day, and you shouldn't miss so many of them. And Josephine's sitting up there, and she's got a sunrise every 90 minutes, not even every day, right? And I think it's just about how no matter where you are, you can appreciate the little things, and that beauty can be found anywhere.
Yeah. I think my takeaway, if I was to boil this entire story into a single, like, line theme, it's that the sun keeps on rising. And here's this entire, like, watching this apocalyptic, mysterious event happen, and Josephine keeps seeing the sun rise, and the sun keeps coming. And even as she's not certain of what her future is going to be, the sun keeps coming. There's this promise of tomorrow, and this hope for tomorrow, too.
Yeah, real persistency.
Persistence is not futile.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask about this piece, or anything else they'd like to say?
You should go read it.
Absolutely. If you haven't read it, you're missing out on something.
Is there anything you would have done differently in this story?
Like if I was a writer, or if I was Josephine the astronaut?
Just for fun, both.
Victoria did an amazing job with this story. I don't think I would change a single thing about it, which I think is rare and beautiful. I know it's definitely going to be on like my ballot for, awards next year, but I feel a little sad for it because I feel like everyone overlooks Flash, unfortunately, and this just does so much in such a short space. I just kind of wish I could be Josephine the astronaut and have that much cool and that much perspective. I think that for me, this is like, I firmly believe that like fiction can make us better people. And this is the kind of story that I hope makes me a better person and, reminds me how to behave in a crisis and, what is important to focus on, even when everything's falling down around you. Like, this came out in March of this year, 2021, a year into the pandemic. And that was like the ray of hope that I really needed at that point in time, was reading this story. So.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. As far as things that I might change, not much at all. There may have been one part in the beginning, or there may be small segments where as I read it aloud, I stumbled a bit. But that could also just be me being bad at reading out loud. I think the story is amazingly done, and the characters are so strongly evoked. I would love to see more fiction like this kind of appear in Utopia at some point in time. What about you, Jonathan? Anything that you would change?
No.
That's the resounding answer. This is pretty much perfect. Lynne, any closing comments? Anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, so I mean, if you can write stories like this and send them to Utopia, that might get me more on the fiction side of things than the poetry side of things. But I think for me, this really shows too that like there is that sort of slippage there, and that prose can be quite poetic without sacrificing what makes it prosy, and sacrificing story. Yeah, we should just all try to be like Josephine the astronaut.
I think that's sound advice. And that is all the time that we have left for today. So I'll see you all next time. And thank you so much for joining this podcast. Thank you, Lynne, and thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.